Good morning and welcome to the Fulbright-Hays Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad Program Technical Assistance Workshop for FY 2018 application. My name is Dr. Pamela Jefferson Maimer. I'm the Senior Program Officer in charge of the Fulbright-Hays Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad Program. I work in the International and Foreign Language Education Office, in the Office of Post-Secondary Education in the U.S. Department of Education. And welcome all of our institutional and student applicants to the process. Today we're going to discuss an overview of the DDRA program, give you a description of the pre-award process, a description of the application review, and give you some application tips, and we have a question and answer session that we will use the questions that were submitted to us to answer your questions about the application, the process, or any other issues that you may have. Okay, so let's go. The DDRA program has a long history with the department. We are over 5 decades, and it started as the Fulbright-Hays Act of 1961, officially known as the Mutual Education and Cultural Exchange Act. The international education programs were originally created under the National Defense Education Act and incorporated into the Higher Education Act, thus expanding the programs beyond the training of specialists and emphasizing the importance of international studies as a matter of general education importance. To help accomplish this objective, the Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad program provides opportunities for scholars to conduct research overseas for 6 to 12 months in the field of modern foreign languages and area studies. Okay, and we have several notable DDRA fellows. Our first screen showed some of our fellows. One is Dr. Leela Hazza from the class of 2008. She is now the Executive Director of Lion Guardians and was recently awarded as a CNN hero. And you can go to the CNN site and you will see her there. Dr. Jason Hickel, who is currently at the University of London as a fellow in the Royal Society of Arts. Dr. April Strickland, she's a 2008 fellow, and she was an anthropologist working on Oprah's Belief series, as well as several others who have been in the program who have very stellar careers. So this program is very important to the career of those who are a part of the program, and we have seen them go on to do really incredible things, and we're looking forward to the next generation, perhaps you, to go on someday and do notable things. Okay, but it all starts here with the application process. So a little bit about what the DDRA Fellowship is. As I said, the Fulbright-Hays Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad Fellowship Program is designed to contribute to the development and improvement of the study of modern foreign languages, and we emphasize modern foreign languages and area studies in the United States by providing opportunities for scholars to conduct research abroad. Now, for the purpose of this program, area studies is defined as an interdisciplinary program of comprehensive study of the aspects of a society or societies, including the study of their geography, history, culture, economy, politics, and education, international relations, and language. Since area studies is broadly defined, we have had students study in many different disciplines each year. DDRA is an annual competition and is an institutional grant, remember that awards fellowships to research scholars. The institution is awarded a grant for 18 months from October of the granting year to March 31st of 18 months later. So for example, the program for this year would be October 1st of 2018 and will end March 31st of 2020. That's 18 months. A scholar must travel for a minimum of 6 months and for a maximum of 12 consecutive months. You cannot take breaks in between your research period. Okay? And this program is intended to provide assistance to students who are well on their way to becoming the next batch of area and language specialists. The program is not for someone who wants a new experience or has never been in a field. Other programs, such as the U.S. Department of State Fulbright Fellowship programs, have programs that are more appropriate for new scholars or those who are not working on their PhD program. Applications for the program will be submitted electronically via the U.S. Department of Education's G5 e-application system. This year, as part of the program, we do have revisions to the competition priorities, and I'll discuss those more in depth, but we have language for our absolute priority, which is not changing, and our competitive preference priorities. We have new language for one, which is the less commonly taught languages priority. The points are new. That is worth 2 points. And also a thematic focus on academic fields. We have a new field included, and now it is worth 3 points. Our invitational priority remains the same and is applications from minority serving institutions. And a minority serving institution means that the institution is eligible to receive assistance under Part A of Title III, under Part B of Title III, or under Title V of the Higher Education Act. So we're talking about programs under the Institutional Services branch of the Office of Post-Secondary Education. So our minority serving institutions programs such as SIP, and a host of other programs, including HBCU programs and the Hispanic Serving Institutions programs. Okay, this year we will have $3.4 million available to make awards. They'll range anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000 or more. The size of the estimated size of the award is around $37,000 as an average, and will make 90 to 100 awards. Now remember, we're not bound to these estimates because our funding is dependent on how many applications we receive and the research locations that are requested. Okay, so who is eligible for grant funding? Only institutions of higher education are eligible to submit an application. And actually, to refine that a little more, only institutions in the U.S. are eligible to apply and submit an application. So if an application comes from an institution not based in the U.S., it's not a U.S. Institution of higher education, or the student is attending an institution abroad, they are not eligible to submit an application. Each institutional applicant must appoint a DDRA project director who assumes the responsibility to register as the project director, and I'll have some information on that, advise and guide individual student applications, submit the entire application with all of the fellowship applications included to the U.S. Department of Education, administer the grant and disperse the funds if awarded the grant, and serve as a point of contact for all of that institution's fellows, as well as our international partners, regardless of the research topic or the discipline. As a student, you are eligible to receive a DDRA fellowship if you are a citizen or national of the U.S. or permanent resident of the U.S. You are a graduate student in good standing at an eligible institution of higher education, and when the fellowship period begins, you've been admitted to candidacy in the doctoral degree program in modern foreign languages and area studies at that institution. If you are not in good standing and you have not reached the candidacy phase, you will not be able to travel to your research location. If you do not pass your candidacy, your fellowship will be forfeit. You plan a teaching career in the United States upon graduating, or you plan to apply your language skills and area studies vital to the U.S. national security or knowledge of these countries in fields of government, international development, various professions, and you possess the adequate skills in the foreign language necessary to carry out the dissertation research project. So we have questions in our technical review form concerning your language proficiency, and you need to have a high level of language proficiency in order to carry out your dissertation research project. Okay, so the project director, to review for the application, the project director will ensure that the student's application has the DDRA application form, a curriculum vitae, a project description, the narrative, an application bibliography, a foreign language, at least one foreign language reference, not in English, not English as the language in the reference form. English is not considered a foreign language. 3 graduate student reference forms, the student's transcripts, letters of affiliation or host country supporting materials if applicable, and the institution review narrative form that's included in the application. So each student's application should include all of these documents. Okay, let's look at the role and responsibilities of each part of the application. So for the institution, you are to attend the DDRA Technical Assistance webinar, which you will be able to do on our YouTube channel. Appoint a project director in G5. You make the application materials available to students. You accept and screen applications in accordance with your own technical and academic criteria at your institution. Includes the student applications with the institutional applications, so you have to ensure that both the institutional forms and the students' applications are included in the DDRA package, and you administer the grant and dispersing funds. So for students, you're responsible for in this process to contact your project director for institutional information. You cannot submit an application on your own. It is an institutional application, so you must stay in contact with the project director to have your application submitted. You must register in G5. You initiate your emails to solicit your references. You must submit a complete application in G5, as well as a institutional review board narrative to the project director to upload into G5, and follow up with the project director to ensure your completed application is included in the institutional application. All questions about the application and process should be directed to your project director exclusively. Okay, as well as the referee, those who are filling out your recommendations. The referee is responsible to receive the reference form from the fellow. They must complete and submit the reference form and hit submit to transmit that reference to your application. And then please have your referee send a copy of your their reference and form to the project director in case there's any difficulty in the transmittal of the information to the application. They should keep a copy of it just in case something happens. As well as the fellows, you may want to keep a copy of your materials in case there's some kind of issue with the application. Okay, so we want to give you some information about what we do to screen for eligibility. And we screen both the institutional part of the application to ensure that there's a registered project director and that your DUNS number and taxpayer identification numbers are correct and entered into the system. And then for student eligibility, we will check for U.S. citizenship, whether the student is in good academic standing, if they're in careers in teaching. If you are in default on your federal student loans, you will not be eligible for DDRA or any other federal grant or award. So we check on that as part of eligibility. And then as well as if you are also, you must let us know if you're applying for other federal grants such as NSF, or U.S. Department of State Fulbright programs, so that we know there's no conflict in the program applications. Okay, so DDRA funds. What can you use DDRA funds in your research location? So, DDRA funds may include expenses such as your travel, your health and accident insurance, books, technology directly related to the proposed research, affiliation fees. There is a maintenance line for your dependents, and a dependent is a married spouse or a child under the age of 21 who attends the research with you the entire time. You cannot have dependents who are not with you the entire time. Your dependent must be with you the entire time of the research. And dependents also do not include common law spouses or domestic partnerships. A spouse is defined as a legally married couple, gay or straight, legally recognized by a state. Children must have a birth certificate in order to be identified as a dependent when you're applying to the program. Okay, now what the DDRA, and this is important because I get questions about this or I have to eliminate it from your budget each time I see these things. So let me tell you up front what the program will not fund. The DDRA Fellowship does not provide funds for research or related project activities conducted in the United States. So none of your research, none of your activities that you may do here in the States while you're not at your research location cannot be included. This is one that comes up a lot. Gifts, stipends, salary, monetary honoraria for research subjects, research assistants, translators. None of that is included in the DDRA funding. So in your project allowance, do not include these. Reimbursement for travel, not approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So if you decide to have travel that we didn't approve, that's not included in your research location, you're responsible for paying that travel. Any pre-departure travel is not included in the DDRA funding. Any allowances for dependents not accompanying the fellow for the entire research period. So your dependents can't go, oh, I'm going to go see mommy while she's in Zimbabwe for a month, and then I'm going to return home. No, your dependents must travel with you for the entire research period. And travel for dependents is also not included. The funds will provide maintenance costs for your dependents, your living expenses, but it does not include travel for dependents, as well as cars, mopeds, motorcycles, bikes. None of that can be purchased with DDRA funds. Travel and expenses not directly related to the project, that's not included. All expenses due to changes in your itinerary or the grant agreement is your cost. DDRA does not provide funding for your changes. This is important. This has come up over time, is that any pre-departure costs, such as if you need to travel to a country to get your visa, all those costs are pre-award costs, and you're responsible for those costs because those are costs associated with identifying documentation, and the program does not provide funds because those are still termed as US-based costs. So we do not pay for passport costs, visa costs, photo costs, any other documentation such as research permission fees, any travel associated with that are not covered under the DDRA funds. Your physical examinations, immunizations, or other medical expenses to be able to travel are not covered. Tuition or any fees for study for projects conducted in the U.S., so your tuition is not covered by DDRA funds while you're at your research locations. And any other obligations not incurred within the grant period are not covered by the DDRA funds. Okay, so please don't put these things into your budgets because they will be removed. Okay, so that's kind of describing some of the information related to the funding and what you put in your budgets. But now let's talk about the meat of it, which is your application technical review, what we will award points based on this information. Okay, so there's two parts to the application. Let me back up. Our peer reviewers are world area specialists in foreign language and area studies from higher education institutions, government agencies, non-governmental organizations throughout the U.S. So our peer reviewers are real experts either in the language that is used in the countries or in area studies, and some are former DDRA fellows. And so they have a lot of technical experience as well as knowledge about the program to review your applications. And these peer reviewers, what we call them, determine your technical scores in accordance with the competitive preference priorities, quality of the proposed projects, and quality of the applicants. So the applications are sectioned into world areas, our absolute world areas, and they will review those applications by world area that they are specialists in. And a maximum of 105 points are available, 60 points for the proposed project, 40 points for the qualifications of the applicant, and our 5 points for the competitive preference priority, and our invitational priority is not assigned any points. So that's where we come up with the 105 points. The program officer, we rank score from highest to lowest. to develop our slate of awards and rank all of the applications regardless of world area. The peer review can take up to 2 to 3 weeks. And during that time, we have panels that review each of the applications. Okay, so let me give you some information on what we use to score your application. This is part of the technical review. So in the first section is the quality of the proposal, which is worth 60 points. And then I'll go into depth on each of these sections, and as well the application qualifications, and that is worth 40 points. And you can see the point distribution per each of the selection criteria is what we call them. So that section alone is the core of the application and is worth up to 100 points. Okay, let's look at the quality of the proposed project. And this is the most important part of the application because here you're describing what it is you want to do. And so it needs to be a very tight proposal. We recommend that your narrative is 10 pages. And so this is where you're going to describe what you want to do and why and the importance of it. So for your hypothesis statement, it's worth 15 points, which is a large percentage of the points in this section. And here, the proposal, what we look for is that the proposal is well organized, excellently conceived, and that the research questions are clear. And we need to understand that the justification of your research methods are strong. Okay, so you shouldn't be vague here. We need to understand what it is you're doing, and your research questions need to be clear. The second section is the theoretical issues, the originality of the project, and the literature review. And here the applicant needs to demonstrate knowledge of the relevant literature in the field, that you've analyzed and articulated the potential impact of your research, and that the applicant demonstrate originality in your project. Okay. Third is the preliminary research, that you have demonstrated that you have a completed substantial that you've completed substantial preliminary research, and that you demonstrate a clear plan for how you will conduct your research in country. It's worth 10 points. Your justification for overseas research. Why do you want to go overseas? Why can't you do your project here in the U.S.? So think about that you will provide clear justification for conducting your research overseas, and the applicant demonstrates appropriate connections to the host country. Okay, we need to understand that you have ties there to the host country that allow you to do this research. That's worth 10 points. Your dissemination plan, how are you going to get your research out in the field? So that we need to understand that you have a clear plan for sharing your preliminary and final findings of the research with stakeholders, academic community, your research location. We need to understand how you get your information out to the field. Okay. That's worth 5 points. Now, the next one is guidance and supervision from your advisory committee. That's worth 10 points. And here we need to understand how you have a clear plan for how the applicant, its advisor, and committee will guide and supervise the work of the applicant. And many of the reviewers look for evidence that the advisor is engaged and invested in your project. Okay, that's worth 10 points. So you can see from there that that's a pretty significant part of the application, and you need to be able to articulate this well because that's the majority of the points. Okay, next is the qualification of the applicants. And here we want to know that you have your high standing, your academic record is strong, that you have a really strong language proficiency, and that you have the ability to conduct research overseas. So in your applicants, your academic record, which is worth 10 points, we're looking for evidence of a strong academic record, which includes a strong GPA, strong coursework, and we want to know if you've been the recipient of previous fellowships and if you have any publications in your area. Next, we're looking for a strong academic strength in the area studies. So this is in area studies. And does the applicant's academic record demonstrate a strength in area studies? So here we're looking for a strong academic record in your area studies, okay, which is separate from a strong academic record overall. This is a very important selection criteria. Is the applicant's language proficiency. It's worth 15% of the application, which is a significant part of the application. And what we want to understand here is, does the applicant's language evaluation reflect an extremely high level of competency? And this is because you're doing a research project abroad. So you're going to need a higher level of proficiency in your language of research rather than just being a tourist going to the country. So here we're looking for a very high level of language proficiency in your country of research. And when we talk about language proficiency, we mean a foreign language. English is not included in this section, as well as if you are a native speaker, you cannot receive points in your language that you're a native speaker in. You need another language that you can assess your proficiency on. So that question is, I usually get a lot of questions about it, but remember that English speaking, English as your language will receive 0 points here. If you're a native speaker of a language, you also cannot receive points. We also have language in the application instructions regarding heritage language, which you may receive a certain number of points if you are a heritage speaker, but you will not receive the full number of points for that language. Because the program is looking for students to acquire a new language or have studied a language, that is the encouragement of this selection criteria. So English is not included and native language is not included, and that's a regulatory restriction. More on that is included in the application instructions. The final criteria is around the applicant's ability to conduct research overseas. That's worth 5 points. And here we look for, does the applicant demonstrate they have the ability to perform this research as proposed? Okay. That makes up the bulk of the technical review. Again, it's up to 100 points. So I encourage you to take your time to do well in this section. I wouldn't depend on the competitive preference priority points they're important, but if you do poorly in the first section, you probably aren't going to be competitive. The next section is concerning the absolute, competitive, and invitational priorities. Pardon me. So we have a revision, but not really a revision, to our absolute priority. The absolute priority is that all applications must address the 7 geographic regions, which are Africa, East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Near East, Central and Eastern Europe and Eurasia, and Western Hemisphere. It does not include, does not include the U.S. or its territories. So none of the U.S. or its territories are included. The language describing the countries that make up Western Europe was removed, but that does not mean that you can apply under those countries as the focus of your research. The absolute priority remains that one of these world areas must be the focus of your research. Okay? I want to make that clear that that has not changed as the absolute priority. Okay? The first competitive preference priority has been revised. If you have applied in the past, or project directors may see that now it is a research project that focuses on any modern foreign language except French, German, or Spanish. We used to include a list of 78 languages that you could apply under. Now it's any modern foreign language except French, German, or Spanish. And I emphasize modern foreign language because we get questions about languages like Sanskrit or Ottoman Turkish or Latin. Those are not modern foreign language. Those are not living languages. And so those are not considered under the competitive preference priority number 1, nor are they considered under qualifications of the applicant number 3. Okay, you cannot use dead languages for any of the criteria for the language, either in the technical assistance, the technical review, or the competitive preference priorities. Okay, that's now worth 2 points. And we have, as part of the administration's focus on STEM, we have revised the second competitive preference priority that includes science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM fields, and computer science is new. The others remain the same: education, comparative or international education, international development, political science, public health, or economics. This priority is now worth 3 points. Okay, so your research project must be conducted in one of these fields in order to receive the competitive preference priority points. Now, as I discussed earlier, our invitational priority, which is there to encourage applications for minority serving institutions so that we can have more of a minority serving institutions participating and applying in our program. Invitational priorities encourage different applications from particular areas, but they are not included in points. Okay, so let's look at some application tips that we found have been helpful in order to encourage the applications to be competitive. You need to think about these areas. Please address all of the selection criteria, and if you're smart, you're going to do it in the order listed in the application packet. So it's easier for the reviewers to find the information if you address the selection criteria as listed in the technical review form. Okay. Don't make them hunt around for information. if it's not there, they don't see it, then they won't be able to give you the points for it. You need to provide a detailed research plan. Be succinct, but make sure you're very clear about what you're going to do. Don't leave them to guess as to what you're going to accomplish. It's up to you to convince them to fund your research. And give sufficient details about your research goals, what it is you want to accomplish, what it is you want to do. And you want to, this is a big thing. It sounds like it's not, but it is. Please avoid grammatical errors or using a bunch of professional jargon or acronyms. You are at the top of the academic area, and so they expect a high level of precision, which means that you're clear from grammar and spelling and sentence structure errors. Okay? And be very persuasive in describing your research. Tell the story about what you're planning to do. One of the things that I look at is to provide a specific and detailed budget. Please use the correct maintenance amounts that are included in the application packet. I look at the budgets, the reviewers do not look at the budgets, but you could cost yourself funding if you are not detailed and specific using the correct maintenance amounts. Okay? And remember, this is your time to convince the panel to help them to understand that your research is of critical importance to be funded. So think from a panelist perspective as for what they would look for. But more importantly, be clear and be concise. Okay? You need to be able, this is for, you could have up to a year's funding. So you need to be able to convince them that your research is clear, it's detailed, you have the contacts, you have the information available to do an excellent job while you're in the field. Okay, so that was some tips on writing your proposal. Most importantly, submitting your application. In order to avoid any issues that may occur in submitting your application, let me give you some tips. First, the institution and the student, you want to register on the G5 system at www.g5.gov early to avoid any systems issue. It would be helpful for you to back up and save your documents as you go to avoid any situations which may occur when you have, if there are any computer issues. G5 is a quirky system, so I would advise you to always have a backup of your documents. When you are writing your forms and your information, please do not use special or non-English characters in any form of the document. And that means for both the fellowship applicants and the referees. For example, don't use like the percents or the ampersand or any of those kind of in your forms, because sometimes G5 has trouble with those, as well as any foreign characters or symbols. Use the English keyboard and leave out any kind of foreign characters, because those G5 sometimes doesn't understand those, and that creates issues for submitting your application. Most importantly, I cannot emphasize this enough, both for institutional applicants and for fellowship applicants. Do not, under any circumstances, wait until the last minute to submit. We give you enough time to be able to submit your application, and we have a hard deadline at July 2nd 2018 at 4:30 and 0 seconds. That's it. So if I were you, I wouldn't wait until 4 o'clock on July 2nd to start submitting my application. Anything can happen, and if there are any issues that your application is not submitted on time, it will not be eligible. Okay, so make sure that you're being proactive and that you get your application in early. Okay, if there are any questions, comments, or concerns, here is the information for program-related questions only. You can contact us at ddra@ed.gov. For technical assistance, please call the G5 Help Desk at 1-888-336-8930, and that includes questions about submission. If you're having trouble with the technical aspects of submitting the application, that's important that you contact the G5 Help Desk. Remember, our deadline is July 2nd, 2018 at 4:30 p.m. and 0 seconds in Washington, D.C. time. After even 4:30 and 1 second, the system is shut down and you will not be able to submit your application. So ensure that you do whatever you can to submit your application prior to this deadline date. We will not accept applications after the deadline. And there's a G5 online training manual, and you can find that on the G5 Help Desk. The G5 team, though, is not going to provide you with any assistance in actually filling out the application. That's your responsibility to complete the application. They will help you with if there's any submission information that you need. But the institution and the student is responsible for submitting their application and for including the correct information in order to have a complete application. Okay? Okay, let me give you some information that may be of help to you in the application process. I took all of your questions that you sent me, and I have here our intern, Mary, who's going to ask the questions that your applicants may ask or your institutions, and I will answer. Okay, Mary.
As I was reading through the NIA, I noticed that the statement that projects focusing on Western Europe are not supported was not in the Federal Register. Does this mean that the scope has now broadened to include research projects focused on Western Europe? Does this mean that the review committee will now consider projects focused on Andorra, Austria, Belgium, Cyprus, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, San Marino, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, or Vatican City? Can you provide any information about requirements for applicants who wish to propose to spend a portion of their time in Western Europe conducting research on a non-Western European topic? For example, is there a limit for how long they can propose for the portion in Western Europe? Is there a minimum amount of time that they need to spend in a non-Western European country?
Okay, so thank you, Mary. Now, as I said before, the application, the absolute priority remains the same. The department will only consider applications that meet this priority. And so what that means is your project has to focus on one or more of the following geographic areas: Africa, East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific and the Pacific Islands, South Asia, the Near East, Central and Eastern Europe and Eurasia, the Western Hemisphere. Okay, Western European countries remain ineligible for the focus of your research. For example, you have an application where you want to look at Afro-Portuguese people and electronic dance music produced in Lisbon, Portugal. You cannot apply under this because Portugal would be the focus of the research rather than an African country. So you have to make sure that your research is focusing on one of the 7 world areas and not Western European countries. Okay, we do approve research that looks at Western Europeans as a subset of that country, but not the focus of that country. Okay, so it's still the same as prior years. I want to emphasize that that your focus of your research must be on one of the 7 world areas listed in the absolute priority.
Can I use DDRA funds to travel to my research location to obtain a visa?
Okay, so I covered this a little bit earlier, and the answer is no, because obtaining a visa is a pre-departure status no matter what country you're in, because there you're trying to obtain your identifying documents. And DDRA does not cover the cost of travel, visa fees, passport fees, research permits to obtain identifying documents. Fellows must obtain the appropriate research visa and/or research permission and all required clearances before departing the U.S. And in most cases, you may not enter the country on a tourist visa with the hope of obtaining the appropriate visa later. This is something that's included in our handbook. And so I wanted to say this in our application materials so that there's a clear understanding that this is a pre-award cost, not a cost that can be covered by DDRA funds. Okay.
What other advice do you have for applicants and reference writers situated abroad over the summer?
So this is an interesting question because we are using U.S. Government servers. If you are abroad, you may not be able to apply using a foreign server. So you will need to work with your institution project director to get your application submitted on a U.S. server.
Can I have a DDRA and a FUSP award in the same fiscal year?
Okay, so I get this a lot. People apply to the U.S. Department of State, IIE, Fulbright U.S. Student Program, and they apply to the DDRA program. And then they get awarded an Fulbright U.S. Student Award, and they get awarded a DDRA award. Okay, so you cannot have 2 of these grants in the same fiscal year. This is covered on page 39 of the application instructions. We go into depth about it, but the answer is that no, you cannot have these 2 awards in the same fiscal year. If we find from the FUSP program that you have been awarded a grant and that you have participated in any pre-orientation activities or have been awarded grant funds, you will become ineligible for the DDRA grant. So make sure you understand up front that you have to make a choice about which grant you're going to participate in.
Can I apply from a non-US university, but I am an American citizen?
Okay, we get this quite frequently with people attending institutions that are not U.S.-based institutions. And the answer is no. The DDRA program is for U.S. institutions and U.S. citizens, but you have to be attending a U.S. institution. So, for example, if you were at the say Oxford University and you're applying to DDRA, you're an American citizen, you're not eligible because Oxford University is not a U.S. institution. You would have to apply from a U.S.-based institution. Okay.
Can I build a holiday with my family over the Christmas break in the DDRA program?
Okay, so no, DDRA does not have a vacation policy. So you need to understand that when you're applying that you will have to go consecutive months to your research location, and there are no breaks. So you need to be prepared that we will not approve any non-emergency travel outside of your research location. So be aware of any weddings, anniversaries, things like that. If it interferes with your research location, you will not be able to attend. So build that into your schedule. And I'll talk more about your time in your research location in a moment.
I have changed my research location after I submitted my application. Will I be able to change my location or the amount of time I spend in the country after my award?
Okay, so this is a big issue for the program, is that your application, you're awarded based on what you submitted in your original application, your dates and your locations. So you will need to make sure that you are clear about when you're going to participate in the program and your locations. Your scores are based on what you wrote, and so you are obligated then to travel to those locations and for that amount of time you requested. So be very clear. No changes will be made to your award after September 30th. So if you have an idea that is now new and you want to pursue that's different from what you submitted, we will not approve any changes to your locations or your time after September 30th. So you get an award based on your narrative. So no changes will be made after the award period.
I am, or my spouse, is pregnant now but won't deliver until after September 30th. Can I submit for a child as a dependent?
We get this question quite frequently, and no, all dependents must have a birth certificate.
My spouse can only attend part of my award period. Can they come part of the time?
Okay, so no. Dependents must travel with the fellow the entire research period, as well as every research location. I had an issue, and this has happened a couple of times, where fellows have wanted to only have their dependents travel with them to part of the location. But they have to attend with you because we're funding them, and the commissions and embassies also want to keep track of who's in their country, that your dependents as well as you have to attend the research locations with you at all times.
I have an applicant who wants to conduct research in Puerto Rico. Is Puerto Rico an eligible research location?
Okay, so I get this question frequently about U.S. territories, and the answer is no. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, and any other U.S. territory that we have are not eligible research locations. Even though there's a lot of room for a lot of research to be conducted in these areas, Puerto Rico is considered a part of the U.S., thus is not eligible as a research location.
How does one add oneself to G5 as project director when the system doesn't recognize the university's DUNS?
Yes, so your Dun & Bradstreet number is a critical number that the department uses to make awards. And so every institution must have a DUNS number to apply. So if you do not have a DUNS number, or you don't know what your institution's DUNS number is, please check with your sponsored programming office and they can provide that information for you.
Are there samples and templates for applicants to review?
I get this question quite frequently, and the fellows would need to check with your institution, and they may have prior applications available for DDRA. The department does not have sample applications for viewing.
Does DDRA distinguish between Parisian French and African French? In other words, would a student do research in Francophone Africa on DDRA? Not visible conflict with absolute priority geographic focus. If so, would the applicant be at a competitive disadvantage because French is technically not a less commonly taught language per competitive preference number 1?
Okay, so this is a good question because we get it quite frequently. Yes, a student could do a project in Francophone French and receive points under the competitive preference, I'm sorry, not the competitive preference priority, but under the qualifications of the applicant number 3. The different dialects of French, whether it's Parisian French or Francophone French, it's still French. So we do not provide competitive preference points for that language because French is not included in our competitive preference priority. So just to be clear, French, Spanish, German can receive points under the qualifications of the applicant number 3. It's just not eligible under our competitive preference priorities. Okay.
Can the DDRA be deferred?
Okay, we get this question and quite frequently, and no, the DDRA program does not have a deferral policy. If selected, a fellow must travel between 6 and 12 consecutive months of research anytime during the 18-month project period. You cannot start your project after March 31st, 2020. Okay, you need to be within 6 months of the end date of that March 31st, 2020 date. Your grant needs to end on March 31st, 2020.
In terms of the applicant's academic record, how much weight is put on undergraduate training, grades, or GPA?
This question comes up, but the reviewers look at your academic record holistically. The academic record is required, but the undergraduate record is not. But it's highly recommended that you give your entire academic record, as it gives a complete picture of the academic record of the student in that question in the technical review form. So it depends on, I would advise that you include your undergraduate record, but the readers will review the academic record holistically.
My host country was just identified as a country close to Fulbrighters after I applied to the program. Can I still go to the country to do research?
Now, this is an unfortunate situation, but once a country has determined that they are not accepting Fulbright scholars to do research in that country, we will not send fellows to that location, even if it's after the application process. So, no. If the country is closed to Fulbrighters, then we will have to not allow that student to travel to that research location.
Given the competitive priority for STEM disciplines, are MD, PhDs, or MDs candidates with relevant projects eligible to apply, or only PhD candidates?
So the program is only for doctoral students. If someone is in a terminal degree that's not a doctoral program, they're not eligible for the program. They're not eligible to apply. So the program is for PhD candidates.
Is it possible for a student to conduct research in their native country if the archives they need to consult are based there and only available in their original format?
So this is a kind of a tricky question. So if it depends, they are eligible to, a student is eligible to have a research location in their native country. However, it's highly likely that they're using their native language as the language of research. Native language does not receive points. If you're using your native language, typically you would not receive points for using your native language under the question number 3 in the qualifications of applicant. So if you're going to your native country, you're going to need another language to be used in that country if it's possible. Otherwise, you would not receive points, and that would not make your application competitive.
A student wants to use Ottoman Turkish. Will this disadvantage him in any way? I understand that he will not receive priority points for the language, but would he still be competitive for award?
Okay, so Ottoman Turkish is not a modern foreign language and thus is not eligible for points in the qualifications of the applicant number 3, nor is he eligible for priority points. Remember, the program is for modern foreign languages and area studies. So that student would have to have another language, such as Arabic, that they are using as their primary language in order to be eligible for points.
The bibliography is double-spaced or a single-spaced?
Okay, your narrative should be double-spaced and limited to 2 pages. Limited to 10 pages and 2 pages for the bibliography. Please double-space the bibliography. Any text in the tables, captions, charts, graphs can be single-spaced, okay?
I want to change the length of my research after I submitted. Can I do so?
Okay, so this is a question that gets asked all the time, but you can, this year, we've had a lot of concerns with students ending their research early, but that is not going to be approved for early departures other than for reasons of health or safety reasons. So you need to be extremely clear about how much actual time you need in the field and not overestimate the amount of time you're going to need, because you will be held to that amount of time for your research. We will no longer approve early departures from the research other than for reasons of health or safety issues. So make sure that if you need 9 months, if you apply for 9 months, that you actually need 9 months, because you will be held to 9 months of research in the field. Okay? And that is that's included in our information in our handbook. So work with your advisors to ensure that the amount of time you request is the amount of time that you need, and that you make sure that if you have been awarded another fellowship or grant, that time starts before or after your DDRA research is being conducted. We will not approve any early departures for the research. Okay? And I think that's all the questions that I received from those of you in the field, and thanks to Mary for reading the questions. And I appreciate all of your questions. If you have additional questions, you can email ddra@ed.gov. Remember, I want to give you a final a bit of encouragement to please do not submit your application after the deadline. Our deadline is July 2nd, 2018, 4:30 and 0 seconds p.m. Washington, D.C. time. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and I wish you the best in your DDRA application and your academic careers. Thank you.